Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome to Shelf Stories and channel that tells tales from games, books, and life. And also, welcome to the One Stop Co-op Shop podcast. My name is Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by to this chat with friends, a person that I am just meeting for the first time, but I feel like I've known him for years. I've played many of his games throughout my gaming life. When I had the old podcast, every night is game night, I reviewed his games throughout. And it is my pleasure to finally welcome him. He is the CEO and founder of Fowers Games. He designed favorites such as Burgle Brothers, Now Boarding, Paperback, Hardback, and a couple of other games of note. He is Mr. Tim Fowers, hailing from Utah. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right. Did I miss anything?
Oh, yeah, you're good.
Okay. I am grateful. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. It is my pleasure to have you on the show. Like I said, I've been playing your games for a very long time. And so today we are going to follow up on a playthrough I did for the One Stop Co-op Shop, a game that I was proud to back called Burgle Brothers 2, The Casino Capers. And I played the tar out of Casino Brothers 1. So I wanted to take this time to kind of talk about that evolution, right? So Burgle Brothers 1 was there, made it 2015, and then the evolution happened to Burgle Brothers 2, which is just delivering to Kickstarter backers as we speak.
Yeah. It's interesting. Initially, from the beginning, Burgle Bros. 1 was with the mission of being like, okay, how can this feel like a heist? Because there's a lot of games that, there's themes and whatnot, but we're like, it actually came from another failed game that was like, it was a hybrid tablet board game thing I was working on. And
actually, let's take a step back and tell, like, just in case somebody doesn't know what Burgle Brothers 1 is. If you've played Forbidden Island, if you're looking on the video show, you know that Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert are sitting back here. Exploration, pawns on tiles, and you uncover the tiles, and there's stuff happening. I even think you credited Matt Leacock in the first rule book for Burgle Brothers 1. So Burgle
very
Brothers
much
1
inspired by the 4 actions, special ability,
right?
Kind of thing.
And then you took that basic engine of exploration along tiles, and then you ported it over to, as you were saying before, a heist game.
So and there's a couple of core pieces, like figuring out that it was a multi-level game and what that meant. Figuring out the guard was a big piece, because it was originally been an app that runs the guard, and then we're like, because we were kind of frustrated with like how the weather works in Forbidden Desert, where it's like sometimes it gets stuck in a corner and you're like, you just kind of feel like it's kind of just luck. And so the waypoint system allowed it to be a board, to be semi-intelligent. But a lot of it came down to just that drive for an emotion, right? That like, and I didn't understand the emotion that I was generating until after the fact. But yeah, I was pitching this other game. I'd go to people and say, hey, you want to play Ocean's 11, the board game? And they're like, they'd light up. Like there's just like this, I want to play that game.
Just right there, Burgle Brothers is Ocean's 11, the board game.
And that was, but that game was not good and did not succeed at that mission. But it stuck with me how much that resonated with people, and that there was this very specific like itch that needed to scratch. And so I've talked in the past, I did a talk at GDC a little bit about how the one of the core emotions of Burgle Bros is the cleverness, that you feel like you're outwitting this guard, you're outwitting this system. You're kind of taking it apart, and that's and so creating a system that can generate a puzzle that you can figure. And Burgle Bros 1 was, we really found it was working when we just turned the screws enough when it comes to the pressure between running out of stealth and running out of time and the guard speeding up and whatnot, that we turn those screws, that it would force the players into a corner, and they'd be like, what are we going to do? And then they'd start to think a little more laterally, like, oh, if we go up the floor and then we go over and we use this tool, and there's usually a moment in Burgle Bros where you can just, it clicks and you're like, okay, I've got it, and then you and you make it out. So
and what the core thing that I loved in Burgle Brothers 1 is it isn't just like a hand management thing. It's not like I take stock of my own personal resources. It's like you're uncovering tiles, and some of the tiles are bad, but some of the tiles are good. So it's like, okay, how can I use this lavatory to stop over here and let the guard pass me, and then I can keep on going? Or how can I set the alarm off over here to draw the guard away so that the other person can go into the stairs? And that was like all of that. That's clever. It's all clever, but it's done also in a way that it's like I can see it in my head. You know, like I can play out, and like so I did a playthrough for Burgle Brothers 2, which we will get to. Don't worry, we'll get to the new stuff. And I played it up. You know, I played up like, oh well, there's the cashier. There's this. You could almost see the stuff playing out. So it kind of like it did both. You know, like on the imaginative end and also kind of strategic cleverness, which was, you know, I imagine that took a lot of work.
We will also just like the nature of stealth games is that very often there's this, it's very high stakes, right? So you need it to be high stakes, but the problem was you get caught, it's over in a lot of these. And so you know, Splinter Cell in video games, it's like, okay, I got to start over or whatever. But in this, my friend Rob actually came up with the stealth system, which is like a health system that makes it like, it doesn't remove the stakes, because every time you lose stealth, you're like, okay, and then you can get down to zero. But stealth has that tension. Even when you're doing really well in Burgle Bros, it can keep enough tension on you that you're like, I don't know. There's something else I was gonna say, but I blanked.
Well, I mean, you can lose like 3 stealth in one go, especially at the top level. If the guard acts in a certain way, or if you get caught in like what is the lobby? I forget which one is like the one.
The foyer. Yeah.
The foyer. Yeah. You can lose like a lot of stealth. So even if you're like doing pretty good, like you're pretty healthy, you could still
it can turn real fast. But then also, it's not over till it's over. You can have like everyone's out of stealth, and you're not caught until you're caught. You know, right. So you know, you can still hang on. Another thing for imagination, I was gonna say is, I find that people project, because we didn't want the guard. We didn't want you to be able to knock out the guard or anything. We want it to be this unstoppable force. Like the guard is a force of nature that you have to work around. Mm-hmm. And the people project onto the guard a lot, because he's this kind of faceless thing.
With Darth Vader.
That like when they blow a hole in the wall or whatever, they think, well, what is the guard thinking about this situation? And that's one of the roots, the anchors for a lot of their imaginative play is the perspective from the guard of what's going on. Why is there this bird and there's a door, you know, and that whole thing that usually leads to a lot of imaginative play, because we didn't fill in that blank for you.
Sure. So. All right. So, I mean, that's Burgle Brothers 1, and that was in 2015, and it's a, you know, kind of a classic game at this point. Like, I mean, if when you make a cooperative games list, or when you make one of, like, you know, family weight list, like a top 10 list, like Burgle Brothers is going to be floating somewhere on those lists. Go ahead.
But yeah, so it took a while. Like I mean, with my games, I try not to come back for a sequel unless I have something new to say. And so it took like a good 6 months or a year of some dead ends of like, okay, oh, what if we do this? And then we're like, oh, that's not fun. Or what if we do this? Oh, that totally breaks the game. And so it actually helped us identify what is Burgle Bros and why does it work? And by going down some dead ends. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, before we get to Burgle Brothers 2, because, you know, we're starting to kind of lean into that, there were some criticisms like on the edges, right? Yeah. Like I think you either like the core system or you don't. Like, if you don't like cooperative games, you're not gonna like Burgle Brothers. This is the way it is. It's very pure distilled essence of a co-op. But even for people who like the game, there were some struggles. So, and I know you know about this because I saw you did a tweet about this. This was years ago now. So in Burgle Brothers 1, so you had the 3 levels, and it was very disadvantageous for all the characters to be on one floor.
Sure.
So
one would stay behind, and
so you have a situation when you're, you know, especially when you're playing, you're really going for it, right? You're not playing no easy mode or nothing. You are going to have 1 or 2 characters at the top floor, but then one character just kind of like stays behind and keeps that guard on the first floor busy. and then everyone else does their thing. So then that became a criticism where it's like, okay, this is, if you're that one person, you're pretty bored. So did you encounter?
Yeah, well, when we were in development, the first answer to that was like, oh, well, let's make an event deck. So if you're stuck in a closet or whatever, and you're waiting for the guard to go, then things will happen, right? That was actually the driver for like these like turns where you maybe don't use all your actions. That actually became these perfect moments for these like plot twists where, oh, something goes wrong.
Right.
But yeah, it wasn't ideal because you could still game it. You could still
go back and forth. You do
a little bit. Yeah, back and forth.
Right.
So we didn't have a really good answer for that.
Yeah, my nephew called it the pee-pee dance because you could dance in front of the lavatory. And I'm playing with my nephew. He's like, Theo, you're dancing in front of the lavatory. What are you doing, the pee-pee dance over there? I'm like, I don't want an event.
Yeah. So there's that. There was some of the other critiques is like, this a big decision was for 2 was we just realized that like 3 levels was maybe like it's just a little too long. There's a little bit of fatigue when you're like one more floor and you can make it, but there's just kind of this like this fatigue that can kick in with a longer game. And so it's like,
especially if it's the same, like there's the safe works the same way on the 3rd floor as it on the 1st floor. It's just that the guard is a little bit faster.
Yeah. So I mean, there's some pressure there, but in general, it's just like there's kind of this rinse repeat feel. And so we're like, so those are some things that we wanted to address. And people have done different, it is kind of an open system. People have done different scenarios and whatnot with it. But so yeah, we wanted to mix that up. And I'm trying to think what else. Also, just like the interaction between the players, because there's this neat effect where I can go to another floor to save you, but I can't have a lot of direct impact on your turn.
Right.
And so we wanted to amplify that. So those were some. I'm trying to think what other ones we were trying to address specifically, but we'll bump into them.
Well, actually, the cooperation, right? And so I actually kind of wanted to get your thoughts about that as a person who designs at this point a number of cooperative games. You designed Walkstar, you've designed Novelboarding, and now you have a couple iterations at this. So then Alpha Player, right?
Yeah. Well, so initially, a lot of designers get into the trap of like, okay, Alpha Player's a thing, I need to solve it. Right. And so Walkstar was like, oh, Space Alert did this timer thing. So what if we had timers and whatnot? And I actually listened to a podcast. I was listening to Game Design Roundtable with Matt Leacock. And he says, like, I decided not to worry about it.
He doesn't care. He doesn't care.
And that actually let me make this game. Like it allowed me to be like, I'm just going to have fun. Like, I'm not going to try to solve that problem. And it was able to happen. And we were able to mitigate it by an unintended consequence of the design. And what it is the kind of information horizon term, where you don't necessarily know, like you have this intent system, like the guard's headed here, but you don't know where he's going after. So you have like a window of information, and then whether to peek or to move, right? That's a big question in the game, and there's not always a right answer. And so that pivots back to like, you can try to run the odds and be like, okay, what tiles are left, or you can try to deduce as much as you want, or where could the guard go. But when it comes down to it, everyone kind of turns their head back to the original player. It's like, what do you want to do? Because there isn't a right answer. And so you have to lean back to the player and be like, we can't decide for you. What risks do you want to take? And that ended up mitigating some level of the alpha player.
And in terms of, so like I brought it up because we were talking about like the cooperation. So like you don't have, in Burgle Brothers 1, you have the static powers, right? Your player, each player has a static power, and generally that static power only fires off in their own turn. So like you have the little, what was it, the acrobat or something like that, who can like sneak through guards, and you have the guy who walks over like fingerprint stuff, and like who disarms traps. Like all that stuff is on their own turn. So like when you are done, if you're playing a higher player count game, then it's like, okay, either you're bossing somebody around because you see the move, or you are, you're basically disengaged. So did you encounter that particular, like, So you said before, like, you saw it, but you kind of like decided on the design space that you didn't think it was a big deal, but like afterwards, like feedback wise, did you get pushback from that from people either at the either dev stage or in the wide release?
Um, no, I think it was later. I think it was more like in the forums and whatnot. I mean, there were some early stages where like we didn't even figure out the moving on different the whole action only happens on the floor that you're on
Right.
thing was a side effect where it's just like, oh yeah, that's how it is in a movie, right? And but we didn't know that, and it ended up being this whole other knob that you could turn was I could go to a different floor instead as something I can do to save you. Um, and but there was early purists that were like, all the guards should move all the time, you know, and I'm like, no, it's actually, it gives the players this agency, but it was kind of a side effect. But the nature of the powers, yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of like handoffs you could do and whatnot, and there was a lot of sequencing that would come out of it. But yeah, there wasn't as much agency. Like you're kind of, people would kind of disengage off of their turn because
Mhm.
they could help try to solve the problem, but
Right.
they couldn't directly impact it.
And especially in a game like this, because like the guard will like will have 3 turns and you'll have no idea. There's no way, like when you finish your turn, there's no way to know what the game state will be when your turn comes back again.
Yeah, you're just like, that's why you don't hang out on a foyer.
Yeah.
Game can be over before you have a turn again.
Yeah, right.
So,
Okay. Okay.
but
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, so like, okay, so we have the multi-floor thing, we have the cooperation amongst players, and also, and let me know if you thought of this. And by the way, I make all these points in the Dice Tower review that I did, which should be live by the time this episode goes live.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Go ahead and go on the Dice Tower for that. Little self plug, got to do that. Uh, for Burgle Brothers too. So then the thing that I noticed, especially at the end, so you've cracked the safe on the top floor, right? And everybody's kind of like waiting to leave. So by the time you get there, that guard on the top floor is flying around. Like he is, he moves at a six speed, and like you're in a 16 grid, a 4x4 space, so it's little, and he is firing off card, or she could be a she, doesn't matter. So then it becomes really random. And he could, if he wanted to, he could just like,
it'll shred you. It'll just go back and forth.
He could just, and or she. I keep on saying he, because it's a block thing. It's like I keep on thinking it's a he, but it could be a she.
Yeah, we've termed it as a he generally, but either way,
could be she. But you can get shredded, and so the ending ended up feeling a little bit like more like a relief. Like, oh my god, I got a reprieve from the RNG gods today, and you know.
Well, and like another side effect was like when you leave. Well, first of all, we didn't want to have to go back down the floor, so we're like, well, what if you escape through the roof? And then when you leave, they're like, oh, you're not on the floor, and so that rule of like action is where you are. All of a sudden, it was this big relief where it's like if somebody makes it out, no guard movement. Somebody else can make it out, no guard movement, and you get this like free. It almost feels like a spree. You get just like, and you just left everything a mess.
That part, like the stream effect is cool. Like when you actually have the opening to go up the stairs. I guess I'm talking about like those turns before where you're like hiding in the corner and praying that the guard doesn't find you, and like the 4 cards that the guard flips.
Or you're like on the save, you're trying to get the numbers, and and it's in a very open, maybe it's in a choke point and the safe's there and you've got to just work there.
Right.
So, but yeah.
So I mean, I described that, and I think that that's a kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Sometimes it's exciting, and some players found that really exciting. I found it sometimes, like kind of frustrating, where it was just I'm waiting for the guard, I'm waiting for the RNG to kind of like roll my way, so to speak.
Yeah, and there was generally the tone of the type of stealth you're doing in Burgle 1 is there's a lot of things that can stop you. The deadbolt, keypad, and the guard itself. And so there's very much a lot of waiting and like,
okay, a lot of like tiles that eat up your actions, like the laser tile.
And so that was an intentional decision. Another thing we intentionally to move away from with Burgle 2 was not as many things that can block you. We wanted to really open it up, but turn up the heat behind you. So it's like, go.
Mm-hmm. So there was a lot. So like as you were developing, so now we can turn to Burgle 2. You mentioned before that it was like, how long did it take you to really start like thinking about, I have something new to say, and I'm going to try to address some of these things?
Oh, I mean, it was end of 2018, maybe.
Okay.
I messed around with it, took it to PAX Unplugged then. It bombed. It was horrible. Played it a couple months later, still bombed. We had tried some different mechanics and whatnot. I think I'm trying to think.
That's interesting. Can you share like just a particular thing that didn't work?
Oh, sure. I mean, part of the fantasy that we wanted to get into was the Whistler, to use, if you know the movie Sneakers.
Yeah,
but the man in the van, right? Mm-hmm. The guy who's like, he has more information, but he can't directly, he's not on the grid. So we wanted to have the eye in the sky player. So we developed this player that had all this information and ability to change things. But we actually took away, like, that player could see where the guard was going, but the players couldn't. And taking that away from the players, like, took all the air out of the game. Because if you look at, it's kind of a modern sensibility in game design. If you look at a lot of video games, they use what's called an intent system, where you know what the enemy is going to do, and therefore you can work around it. And that is your puzzle. And so there was this limited communication between, like, the Whistler would have to use resources and whatnot to share information with the players, and they were really flying blind. They had very little information, and they just felt frustrated. They're like, I don't know. She knows what to do, and we just realized it was very important to have that waypoint, and the information that represents was really critical. But the Whistler character had these powers that were like, instant, reactive powers. They're like, these are fun. They're really just like perfect moment for the right thing.
And outside of turn stuff, it's like, you'd get like, one person's walking and then the guard could be coming because they're going to trigger like an alarm, but then that Whistler will be like, all right, hold on. There you go. And that became the inspiration for some of the new stuff.
System. Yeah. And so the gear system was probably one of the first ones where we just realized they're kind of like a tool, but they're instant. But
so let's talk about, so just to kind of walk back, because not assuming that everybody knows not everybody watch my playthrough. Go pause the podcast and watch my playthrough, please, or watch the many playthroughs. So in the first game, the players had static powers, always on, simple, do your thing. Second game has not static powers, but it has these modular pieces called gear, and you can prep that on your turn, but then you could fire it off anytime.
So the gear, this gear is, but what was important is that it was reactive, that you could use it that you could react to someone, but it was also that it was a sacrifice. This is one belief I have about cooperative games, is that the whole Ben Bernay talk about vulnerability. Humans form bonds through vulnerability, right? About and that I can't solve this thing and I need help doing it. And so the first step is vulnerability, that like, I'm in a situation that I can't save myself. I'm going to get caught this turn or whatever. And then having another player being able to sacrifice. And so it has to be a sacrifice. It can't just be like, I've got this thing I can do infinite times, I'm just going to do it for you. It's like, no, if I use it for you, I'm not going to have it later. And it's a signaling thing, that I'm signaling to you that you're important to me and to the group. And so that little hand, reaching out your hand and grabbing that person and getting them the safety is a big moment. But then we want to have a very limited but powerful set of abilities of like, when do you want to use these? You have very limited times to use these through the game. What are the important times? So you can feel like, you saved the person, and they get to feel important, that they were important enough to save. So it's, and that was a core thesis behind the gear.
And there's also a cost in actions before you even do the thing. Like, you don't just get them. you have to prep them.
Yeah.
Right. And I imagine that was like it also, I am now costing myself something in order to have it later, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That all seems to fold in.
Yeah. Initially, it was we had the concept of you started with all the gear, but it ran into this problem where you were almost too front loaded, where you had everything up front. It would make sometimes people burn them too early. Sometimes it would just maybe you just felt you didn't feel like a progression, like you weren't kind of ramping into your ability. And so having the prep system, and then we added the very late thing where there's a dead drop system, where there's like you have to earn your gear by doing these mini achievements. But it was very late we added that. Actually, even prepping was one of the last things that went into the core game.
Interesting. Okay, so then that addresses the cooperation piece. Like now you are engaged throughout your throughout all your turns. It's like, okay, when am I going to get to use my gear? Do you need my gear or whatever it is? I don't want to disappear on you or something like that. So that really addressed that piece.
It clicked. I mean, most of it was finding ones that still resonated with their kind of identity, because we wanted to still have the same cast and be like, what can we, how can we reintroduce? And some of them, like the Hawk, she was a pretty radical change, and she's kind of almost an advanced player now, where she can like swap 2 tiles, or she's got a very different kit now. In other ones, it's like the Rook was the baseline. I can move other people. I can swap with people. I'm the team leader.
I love
so there was some identity. I love
the Rook. So yeah, you carried forward all 9 characters from the first game to the second game. So it's like the same cast. So this is Ocean's 12, so to speak.
Yeah. We were thinking about like, do you want a stretch goal and have another character? But we already were like, okay, we've got we've got 3 gear for every character, and then we have an unlockable 4th gear, and it's just like, it was a lot of content to create. So we were like, we ended up not we actually didn't have the Peterman initially. We brought him back, so we got Volcast.
Well, the Peterman works a lot different, because in the first one, it's he manipulates dice, and that can get us to what you did with the save, because there's far fewer opportunities, because there's only one save.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things with the save. It's like it's kind of the same, but we wanted 2 things. We wanted it to be harder to do. So there's like how you get the dice is different now, and then getting the dice to the safe, is a thing. And we wanted to have this like teamwork. So like the person on that bottom floor still has something to do. Right. And so this we wanted to play into the teamwork. And then when you open the safe, we wanted to be, we wanted to play into that's straight up like we wanted to tell a story, or we wanted to have, because the event system initially had this like plot twist where interesting things were happening, but like the finales is just like, okay, what if we just broke some rule of the game? Like in this scenario, you want to get caught. What? It's just like,
right.
How can we flip the script on the game and go out with a bang?
So then, and that's the last thing. Yeah. And that's the one that kind of, if you saw my Dice Tower video, that is the one where it's like, I just kind of faint over. I'm super excited. So in Burgle Brothers 1, you have that guard flying around, and it's like, I just kind of described maybe a kind of frustrating scenario. So it's like, it's almost like a relief when you win a game, Burgle Brothers 1. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's not so much. The finale system, I think, is always good. Like it's because I played through all 9. They're amazing.
The trick with those is we had to design ones that could generate a goal based on really any kind of board state. Like, what if this is close to this, or what if the players are close to this, or whatever. And how do we account for this? And so we had to make stuff that would be like, okay, there's going to be edge cases, but most of the time this will represent a good challenge and not either be trivial or be, impossible. That was the 2 edge, we're shooting for. So generating systems that could do that was the goal of the finale system.
And thematic as all get out. So like I don't want to. So in the review, I was careful not to spoil, but you do see the componentry. Like you do see there's a car there, so you can. It doesn't take much to think where there's going to be a car. There's a tiger there, and like steak.
It's not a lemon. It's not a lemon meeple.
Yeah. I thought actually I knew what it was, and I won't say what it was, but I pretty much got what the little oval yellow thing. But the tiger and the steak there's no mistaking that if you've seen The Hangover or something or something. I imagine like you're pulling from all these like kind of tropes to to make the finales, but the finales kind of like just take this system and like the gear stuff addresses things, and like you have the little chips tokens, which kind of like I imagine they allowed you to do some things in terms of like moving people around and creating a sense of kinetic.
The chip system was that there was a lot of tiles that were only interesting when you uncovered them or went into them, like the walkway, right? It's kind of this one shot thing, and so by doing chips, it allowed us to have these one shots, but then have a more permanent effect from the tile. So the tile could be persistent and have an effect on the game. So, but yeah, that's a side note for chips.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But yeah, so it turns it up, and you get this big finale where it's just like, it feels like it's a climax instead of being more like things are getting harder and it's kind of linear. It's like, no, this kind of this exponent that you're like it kicks it up, and you're like, okay, can we pull this off? And I didn't want players to. Because some of them you can line up and be like, okay, we know what this finale is going to do. Let's set up in this particular way. Now, as much as that would make sense for like someone who was actually planning a heist, I didn't want it to be too gamed. And so I made it so you don't know exactly how the finale is going to work when you're playing through the first time. And then when you play through after you've unlocked everything, it's still random. Yeah. And that was kind of intentional for that same kind of like variance where it's just like you can't you have to adapt, and that's the whole thing about Burgle Bros is adaptation as a group. It's like, okay, here's a curveball, what are we going to do? And like and then as a group solving that is satisfying, but and so I don't know, I think you could run a particular scenario and it would probably be fine, but it's a mix of like you got to have the RNG and you got to have the strategy. It's like it's a mix.
I mean, for the weight of this game, like we're not talking like a really heavy, crunchy game. Like you want that sense of tactics, because if it's like a Dominion type where it's like the answers are there and you just kind of like puzzle through the answer, then it's not a heist anymore, and like you kind of lose some of the tension and emotion.
And push your luck even, like how risky do we want to be? So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know you appreciated my encounter with the saleswoman in my playthrough.
Yeah, so Jeff Krause was a co-designer on this, and I've been making last couple of years. I've been making video games with him, and we haven't released very much. But he is very much from the school of he's the bad cop. Right, I'm the good cop. I'm like, oh, let's be nice to the players, and I want them to have a good time.
He's
like,
resources, give them everything they need.
Yeah, and he's like, no, they need tough love, and so the saleswoman, a lot of the more evil things that happen in the game, the tiles and whatnot, they're from Krause. They're like he kind of revels in it. Where it's like, and I'm like, you can't like trap a player. He's like, yeah, you can. I'm like, no. And so it makes us like, and it works because there's this immediate crisis when it's like that player is stuck. They cannot move unless you have, the right gear unlocked or someone's going to save them. And again, the vulnerability and sacrifice thing where it's like someone has to go solve that problem. You could leave them stuck, right? But choices to make. So.
Yeah, so it's a chip. It's one of the denizens. I call them the denizens because they're all like people in the casino. And if you enter the saleswoman square, and you could like reveal it and then get rid of it, but like if you enter her square, like you do that push your luck thing where it's like I'm just gonna run through, and you get the saleswoman, she will stick you. And I was at the point during my playthrough where I was like, just kind of like running through, getting out and stuff like that. And then I used the rook to get in with the saleswoman, and then the rook had still out all his gear, and the rook moves people. And that was a thing that you said in the things, like you can move people, including yourself. So then it became this wonderful little thematic moment of like, I got a call, I'm out here. And like that is, and I know you say you like, you know, we were talking, I don't know if it was before the call or during the call, like you don't intend to kind of go at the game with narrative. Like I would say the game is heavy in story, but not heavy in narrative. And like you really do, you Burgle Brothers, of all the family way co-ops that I've played, especially the second one, it you know, without having narrative, has the most story, I think, or generates the most story.
Well, it's just what type of, sometimes people have more, it depends, right? There's different types of narrative and whatnot. So like I shy away as a designer of like above and below, right? Where it's like, here's a story, make a choice and whatnot. I'm more, it's more about emergence of like, it's a roguelike in the sense of like, here are a lot of different random things I can throw at you, but they have their own rules and they're cohesive in their own thing. And then people will connect the dots and they'll start to tell themselves a story about, you know, what the guard's doing or whatever. And so, the finale is more than I've ever done when it comes to just like, here is a moment, but it's a boss. It's like, okay, this is the boss, you know, and so we had some room to do that. But.
Yeah. So the criticism that I articulated in the video of 2, and I love 2. I'm gonna tank for it, but it does add a lot of extra pieces and it does add up a lot of extra stuff. So like, so in solving some problems, and I wouldn't say you introduce new problems, but like, you know, now you go from a simple character to a character that you have to kind of manage, you know, and you have to like, you know, prep and all kind of stuff. And, you know, where am I going to put the card? And then the chips, like, so you have the chips on the board, which, you know, remembering what the chips do is not always the easiest thing. Yeah. And then you have some finales that kind of like, because you get rid of the chips along the way, but then a lot of them flood the chips right back. So, so then,
or on top of that, there's events, right?
And
there's
the events.
Lounge and the pool, which we didn't want to make as optional anymore. We're like, no, you know. And so again, it's like the critique I've heard of 2 is that the RNG is turned up higher, but you do have more direct control with gear to counter RNG.
Right.
So is it balanced? I don't know. I mean, we like,
you're the designer. You're supposed to know.
I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where you know, me and Jeff enjoy it. Like it's at the point it's out, and again, like as a designer, you're kind of broadcasting on a frequency, and like that will resonate with some people, and it won't resonate with some people, and it's totally fine. Like, you know, and so that's the thing is like, but and we also want to empower players. You know, I one of the other last minute changes, I made the backs on Burgle 2 the same as Burgle 1, so that you can actually do a setup with 32 uniques. Like all the tiles are unique. Oh, wow. For the whole for every, so you could bring all the stuff in from one. Now alarms are a little bit different, guards are a little bit different. Those are mostly streamlining for clarity. The way that those work was, I felt like you know, that was we had a better answers for that, for how to have a guard react to an alarm. We call it commotion now, but you could bring Burgle tiles in and just say, okay, what system we're going to use, the commotion system or the alarm system. We're going to use bouncers or guards, but they're not that different.
Okay. So actually, I didn't mind the RNG so much. Like the worst of it is when like you get like the pool and the lounge in that choke point. Yeah. So like so that's where it becomes an issue for me. So like the pool and the lounge, they're tiles that generate events. So like in the first game, the events got generated when you didn't use all your moves. So like you just got random stuff. Here you go in the pool, which I love. It's like, okay, cannonball in the pool and something happens. Like commotion. The waypoint moves. You know, like now the bounce is going to go to that point. So then you might get those tiles in the choke point, and just because of the geometry of the board, nothing that you did, you might be triggering multiple events in the same turn, and that can kind of like mess with you. But you know, for me, solving that might have introduced even more complexity. And I felt like, so my thing wasn't that this game had more RNG. It felt like this game had a little bit more overhead a little bit more to kind of think about.
Yeah,
And
yeah. The like I don't recommend playing a solo game with 4 players because the overhead of like when is the right time to use 12 pieces of gear
right.
is a lot, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah, there can almost be some AP with the options that you have, and because there are different ways to solve problems now, but like what's the best one, you know?
Right. So that's something that you just like, you know what, this solves so many problems, like what I did, or like it comes at things with new ways that it's like, okay. It's like,
Yeah, you can deal with that one.
yeah, just
So,
deal with it. Okay.
but what else? So what other things were we solving with the new? Um, um,
Okay. So my four criticisms were the multi-floor thing, which was, you read your
oh,
deck poorly.
that was a tough call, and that was Krause. It
Okay.
was like he's like, you got to cut a floor. I'm like, no. He's like, you got to cut a floor. I'm
That's
like,
16 tiles. What are you talking about?
you're right. You know, it's like almost every time I'm like, he says something. It's like, yes, you have to do this big thing. I'm like, you're right.
That's a lot of tiles to cut though. Like, I mean, did you work on different configurations? Did you work on like a 3x4 or like, like little iterations like that?
Yeah, we a 3x4. We were trying to shrink it that way. But yeah, but it kind of clicked the same time we were talking about making the safe, one big safe, and having, I don't know if the finale came then, but it was about that same time we're like, okay, yeah, and figuring out like and also I really did want to have a tower included in the box, like because it was a feature that a lot of people liked as a perk. I don't know if it was worth it because of all the production issues it's caused, and it's not perfect, but
So
I've got to try.
So then if you saw the tower and you see any playthrough of this, not just mine, you look at Rodney Smith teaching or anything like that, it's like, here's the tower, now we're gonna like dispense with it in order to actually play the game.
And that's I don't know, it's like I had to try it. It's one of those things where like I have to innovate, I have to bring new things,
Right.
and it bites me half the time, but I've got to try. And it's so
yeah. So I actually did put in for my replacement box because the glue came out on mine, and the like there's plastic little moldings in the box, and you fold it out and you stick the sticks in, and that's how you get, the box kind of folds out. I should probably show it on the video, but I got it all the way up here. I'm not gonna mess with it. You see it in your mind's eye, people. The box folds out, you stick sticks in it, and it like floats above the playing surface. So you have the 1, 2, and it's a great idea, but if the pieces don't glue together very well.
There were some production issues with glue not working, but we don't know how big of a hit rate it was. But there's some, most of the problems we had with production ended up being like, well, yes, it mostly interferes with like the tower working, but it luckily doesn't interfere with being able to play the game, it's the stuff that keeps you up as a designer, because a lot of it's out of your hands. It's like you try to do all the Q&A and you try to prepare for all this stuff, but like, but yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
okay. So then do you feel like this, like Burgle 2 kind of, I don't know, like, I mean, so I always have this idea of a designer, right? Like a designer, I think there was Ignacy Trevicek who told me this on his own interview, like a game is never done. So it's like, I release it and then it's like, oh,
oh yeah.
So do you feel like, Burgle 2 kind of realized at least most of what you wanted to do following up on Burgle 1, or is there like more stuff?
Oh yeah, no, yeah, most of it's just like, I'm actually pretty happy with, we had enough time with it because of the production was taking so long that like, we'll see. I mean, I haven't.
Oh, because it was during
for the core
COVID,
game. It's like,
right?
I'm pretty happy with where it's at. Most of it's just around the production and the tower and whatnot. But like the core, I don't have a ton of regrets. It's like I'll have to see the response, see what resonates, what comes up out of it, because it's like, I'm just a person. I can only test it and try things so much. And so, see what people come up with and see how it resonates with people. And then I might, I mean, you can do some things with expansions and whatnot, but like a lot of it's just like, and it's really hard not to internalize. when you do mess something up, but you have to just see it as like, it's a snapshot of you and as a designer and all the other influences and all the people you're talking to at the time. And it's just like the awkward middle school photo of yourself where you have to kind of be able to laugh at your own
right
awkward photo. You're like, yeah, that was me, and it's like, but because if you internalize like a lot of your self-worth as like how good the game is for everyone, it's a recipe for like, it's like you have to be able to back away from your design and critique it, and it's really tough emotionally to create some distance, because but it also helps me on the other side to be able to take compliments, because it's like I understand that people are complimenting the game, they're not complimenting me, because I don't want to internalize that kind of like ego boost. So good or bad, I have to make a little bit of distance and be able to like poke at it for good or bad. And then when somebody compliments it, I can now like come from their perspective, like, yeah, those parts are good about the game. But yeah, as an artist, as a designer, it's tough to keep that distance. And I feel a lot of obligation to players. It's like I want to execute it well and whatnot, but it's me and a handful of people. Like I try to like, this is artisan crafted games. It's like I don't have a whole crew, or I don't have like maybe some of the larger companies do. It's just it's me. So warts and all.
It's you have, it's not only the Jeff Goldsberry art, because he does the art for everything, but like there's definitely a design sensibility to a Fowers game. Like I kind of know when I'm playing one, because it's very
rulebook's kind of bad, but there's this like yeah. I mean,
something to it. Yeah,
there's a through line, but but a lot of it is that I'm having fun making it, and I hope that players are having fun playing it, and a lot of it is just like the artwork. I really kind of sells this world of just like, let's have a good time, and kind of put on that mask of like, I'm going to be the rigger, or I'm going to be I'm going to be this character, and yeah, there's a lot of positive comes out of it. So
you mentioned that you kind of dropped the idea of an expansion, and how like a lot of games, they address their issues via expansion, or like they add things, or designers kind of address it via expansion. Fowers games don't tend to have expansions.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is because I can't, like, I'm like your mom packing your backpack for school. I'm like, okay, you might need this, and you might need this, and I stuff all this stuff. You look at Paperback, there's like 10 little expansions in there, because I'm just like, in case you need this, and it's one of those things where it's like I'm trying to just get you covered,
right,
and then let you as the player decide what how you want to play the game, and find out what works best for you, and give you the tools to do so, because I assume some intelligence on the part of my players. I'm not gonna hand them everything, and then just give them those. And so because I really try to pack in everything I was thinking about, I don't really hold back. It works out to where I don't have anything really new to say about the game for a couple years,
because you put so much in on that end. It's like, okay, Paperback, I want to put a solo and a co-op. I want to put this variant in there, and like every Fowler game does have variants that are packed in.
Yeah. And there was, so yeah, and then I try to encourage that, because it's like I can't see everything, and when I'm developing and testing, and then even later in the process, it's like I want to bring in players and be like, tell me how to make the game better. And I've gotten these super clever ideas for all of my games. It's like, oh, if you just did this, like, oh, that's way better than what I thought of.
Right.
And so yeah, it's and I like to think that a big chunk of my games came from just a really clever player. It was just like, did you see that? Because you have so many blind spots.
Sure.
I've gotten a lot of help from Ryan Lockett. Right, he's local to me here, and like Burgle Bros, like we went and we went to his office and we played, and I forget the exact conversation, but he's just like, why do you make it about a casino? Or like there's I don't forget how it started, but he's just like, yeah, like that's and so and the other one was with Now Boarding. I played a prototype of Now Boarding with him, and I was all worried about like, well, what if like there's this timer going and then like one player like runs over, it drops off a passenger, the other one picks it up. It's like that's like cheating, and he's like, you let the players cheat.
Yeah.
And so now like, that's my rule now is like anytime I'm just like, man, the players could totally game this, and then I'm like, wait a minute,
yeah, that's not so bad.
Maybe I should let them do it, because it's like you have an understanding of like, okay, what's kind of like fair or gaminess and whatnot, and sometimes letting people, again, trusting your players and just being like, and that's a huge part of what became Now Boarding, was like figuring out the handoffs. Is like, okay, don't move. I'm gonna fly in here, drop this guy off. You take him there, come back. I'll get this other guy, then I'll finish my moves. And it was like, so as a designer, you have a lot of blind spots. Question a lot of your conceits. Just like things you're taking for granted. And that really can bring in really fresh ideas and solve problems in really clever ways. So.
Burgle Brothers 2, I think, addresses a lot of the issues of Burgle Brothers 1. My ultimate conclusion was that it's still worth having Burgle Brothers 1 because it is a simpler entry. Like it's less admin. You could just plop it down. And, if you want to lop off the third floor of Burgle Brothers 1 and just go with the set, you can. Like you can really make, and I think it's the most easy game to get into for like a family setting. And then Burgle Brothers 2 is that kind of graduated experience. So like they're both going to stay in my collection.
Yeah, well, and that's a question. It's like movies have sequels, but like, what does a sequel to a game mean?
Right.
Like what should it? Is it like continuation of the story? And I heard advice from Tom Lehman, where it's like give them more of what they like. And yeah, it's like I realized that I've already kind of paid a price. Anytime you teach something new to the player, you're paying a price. Like there's an overhead of learning new rules, internalizing the systems and whatnot. So I realized with a lot of the design decisions, it's like we've already taught the players how to do this with Burgle 1. So now we can build on that. We can start from this baseline, and we can go this much further because we're not having to start necessarily at zero. I still do worry about some accessibility, and I want to not make it too complicated. So we shaved off a little bit with the commotions and the bouncer, but overall, yes, this is a love letter. This is for people that like you like Burgle Bros. It's like this is the graduated experience was a lot of the goal, and I'm understanding that like that it's fine. Yeah, it's like it'll give somebody something new to chew on. They've played this one to death. Here is a whole bunch of new variables.
Right. And I think like what a gamer thinks about when it comes to like either a sequel or reiteration is, does this replace my previous thing? Like, can I get rid of this? Can I get rid of the old one? Or am I doing the new thing that's like a zombicide, right? Okay, I got Black Plate, I got Green Horde. Now, what does it do to my old stuff? And it's like, okay, can I integrate, all this kind of thing? And you could either have a product that fully integrates, which it kind of does, I don't
have anything official yet because I didn't have enough time to like fully do a test. And I'd like to see what people would do with it. I'm like, here's two.
People can integrate it. Y'all got it. Both of them.
And people are great at scenarios with it. So it's interesting to come out a sequel, but and we'll see. I mean, like hardback was supposed to be an expansion. Like I worked with Jeff Beck in that case. I'm like, I've got these ideas for a sequel or an expansion to paperback. I want more of this. And he came back with a whole new game. I'm like, well, okay, I guess we're making a new game.
Okay.
So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you see this in other designers. They say like as an artist or as a writer, you're always writing the same book. It's like you're kind of chasing similar ideas and so this is like I wanted to go all the way into a cinematic kind of experience with it. So
yeah, and so time will tell on a Burgle 3 or like another iteration. Like if it resonates, then sure, but you don't have it like percolating. You don't. You're not like I have the next 9 Burgles like mapped out in my head or anything.
No. I mean the other thing was like I did want to have some identity, so it was nice. Like the 3-4 thing is now the Burgle 1 thing, and so like there was like 4 tiles or 5 tiles that I pulled over from Burgle 1 into Burgle 2 at the point of the Kickstarter. And after the Kickstarter, I'm like, no, I can do better than this. I pushed myself to make all uniques. The only one that is a straight unique is is the safe, even though that kind of works differently, and the monorail, which is like the duct. I mean, those are the only. Everything else I wanted to, for that kind of integrated thing. Like it's just like, how can I do some different twists on? Even there are some shadows of like other previous tiles, but we wanted to do some new things. And I like the blocking, like really didn't like the deadbolt. I mean, the deadbolt is a key piece, but like so much of the game can be like dealing with the deadbolt, and it was a little too much star of the show. And so, the other one was the hunt mode. That was another one from Krause, where it's just like, what if he just doesn't recycle his deck? What if he just goes Terminator
just
on
find you?
And that and the gear were like the first 2 pieces where we're just like, because it's like, you're not going to hang out on this floor.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, again, Burgle 2 gives you a lot of, addresses Burgle 1, does more stuff, but Burgle 1 still has a place in your collection. I'm going to keep both. And if you do release an expansion, or if like there's like, you collect the scenarios that are like fan made and not going to put them out as an extra or whatever it is, then, I'm sure there's room for it. And there's room for that in my collection. It's definitely for that. So then that is, Fowers Games keeps on going. You're not going to stay in Burgle. You have other things going on. And we were talking before the call, there is a Kickstarter that is coming up soon, and we can kind of end on previewing that a little bit. Tell the people's about Paperback Adventures.
Yeah, so we're just starting to release information about that, but it is a adventure in the Paperback universe.
Paperback being a deck building word game,
which
is a very cool little thing. But for those of you who don't like Scrabble and don't like getting stuck on 2-letter words, there are other word games. Paperback's a very good one.
Yeah, when Paperback was like, I actually don't like word games. It was more of a challenge. Like, it started as an old video game I made called Clock Words, and then it evolved. The deck building was one of the key pieces of that, and it evolved into Paperback, and the Paperback evolved into hardback. This is more like, it takes cues from like Slay the Spire, and like, kind of like, you're going on this adventure, you've got a limited amount of health, and you're trying to make it to the end, but you might not. All right. It's got some inspiration from Gloomhaven. It has a very limited deck size. So oftentimes when you're building your deck, you're having to remove cards to put new ones in. And then there's just these passive and active items that change how you're doing things. Like we call them MacGuffins, because we have a lot of literary puns in the new game. But
it's a word game. You have to have literary puns.
Yeah, we've got and so you're going up against a mashup of like the different villains and antagonists. We have one called the Pesky Suitor, who's from like a Jane Austen novel. But you're doing more of a proper combat, where like you're generating kind of these attack icons, and you've got these block icons, and then you're generating kind of energy or mana that you're driving. You're using these different, we're pulling from all these different novels and whatnot, this sword or this wand or, whatever. You've got this, and then the MacGuffins are like the monkey's paw and like all these like other tropes, and they're passive. And so you get these combos between what your deck is doing, what the items are doing, what the MacGuffins are doing, to get these really tricky or interesting combos that are very generative. Like they're very emergent in like how you piece it together.
So is it still a word game? Is it still a spelling game, basically? Or wow.
There's underneath the engine is this spelling and a splay system. So you're gonna get me in the rabbit hole here, but like,
do not ask a person about their Kickstarter. They will
there's a bunch of new mechanics. So it is an order of magnitude. Like there's much more going on than basic Paperback, and even more than hardback, but it is a solo game. So you're on an adventure. and we this is just kind of for the player who wants like that complexity of like Scrabble, where like you're trying to optimize and you're trying to like work the perfect word into the board, but maybe you don't have friends that want to do that with you. So we made so Paperback Adventures is the solo. There will be we're working on some 2-player variants, but the focus is a satisfying solo word game. There's plenty of the word building itself, but then there's these systems on top of it. So I'm excited. Like it's one of those things where it's like I'll tell you all about it, but it's coming to Kickstarter soon, and we'll be it should be showing playthroughs and whatnot, and so you can back us there.
So we're looking at releasing this episode around the first week of May, and then later in May, if all goes well. We'll
if all goes well, mid to late May.
If all goes well, mid to late May, and we're working on getting a preview up on the One Stop Co-op Shop. So go ahead and check out, look out on our channel for that. But I do have you, so I should probably ask about Now Boarding. Now Boarding is one of my favorites. You don't hear as much about that, but I love that game. I think I
have you heard about the mega version I've done of that?
The what?
Mega version, mega Now Boarding.
So I only have the original Kickstarter box. I don't have anything that was passed.
Oh, no. You play with live people.
Oh, okay.
So I did this at Shucks, and I did it at PAX Unplugged, and I build a 30-foot by 20-foot map of the US with blue masking tape and doormats for the cities, and play with real people.
Oh my
God. So
you get they hold signs that say JFK, and you have to like kind of bring them to JFK. Oh my God.
Well, the playmat, they on the things, whatever. There's a whole tangent, but like it's hilarious because there's person giving out tickets. So when you spawn passengers, you give them a ticket that says where they start and where they want to go. And to track their anger, we give them literal airline peanuts. So if they get too many airline peanuts, they leave. And then we get bungee cords, and so the captain of the plane will have so many bungee cords to pull people around the map, and like 30 people you'll see, like I've got videos of like all these people going into Denver and then going back out, and then a bunch of people getting delivered, and then like all of a sudden clearing up, and like because it's still timed, it's still like 30 seconds or 45 seconds for everyone to move. It's kind of dumb fun, but it actually scales. Like the game actually scales to a live event.
Wow.
But I've only run it a couple times.
I mean, I was at PAX Unplugged. I missed that. I would have been all over that. Yeah. I love that.
It was like 20.
I love Now
Boarding. I think the first or second year I did it. Okay. But sorry. Question about Now Boarding.
Well, I mean, there is a second edition.
Yeah.
Right. What is changed? What is different?
Oh, that was more of a reprint. We figured out how to fit a bigger map in the box.
Ah, okay.
And there was just a couple little typos to fix. Like there's a quantity on one card that was wrong, and we put little anger stickers. So there's little angry faces to put on all the red cubes now. It was kind of just a little update. It was just kind of like we realized and people, the board, people didn't really like the smaller board. So we're like, well, I think if we fold it this way, we can get it in there.
Cool. So, all right. So, I mean, but all this stuff is available on the Fowers game website.
Yeah. I need to put I haven't actually put an item up for people to get the bigger board, because you can actually fit the bigger board in the original box. But just contact me. I can get you one.
Cool. All right. So we got not role player, but Paperback Adventures coming up. We got Burgle Brothers 2 is making its way out to the wilds and everything. And
it's tragic because one container arrived, and so half of the people got their game, and the other one has been stuck. And so there's the haves and haves not, and I feel bad, but the shipping situation just fell to pieces. The
land of COVID, I think that people are, as long as you communicate with them, I think people are kind of like,
I feel bad, but
we get it. We land of COVID. Let's get vaccinated. Let's get back to stuff.
And I love to see people at conventions. So come say hi. I love to chat. So
absolutely. So Mr. Tim Fowers, thank you so much for stopping by the show.
Yep. See you later.
If you change your mind, you can change the world. So until next time, later, everybody.